I miss the scorching wind of Andalusia, how it pours sunlight onto your face, toying with eyelashes, flattening dry sand against cheeks and milling around hair. I miss the smell of the valley and that ripening softness of muscat fluff glistening in the afternoon breeze. From up here, I can see the house where I grew up. I see white chapels tucked into grape orchards like pawns scattered on a chessboard. I can see patches of asphalt on El Jardinito Road hailing from the old town through dappled rocks, then waning behind the horizon with erratic headlights of beat-up trucks cruising along. One of the pit stops along El Jardinito, where truck drivers stop to relieve themselves, marks the starting point to this wavy trail. All covered in blotches of spindly grass stalks and flaxen sand, the trail is barely noticeable at first. Truth is, no one even cares to notice it. Why would truckers taking a blitzly care to check on a mucky trail leading to God knows where? But I do. This is how I got up here, to the top of this hill, where I am standing now. I've climbed all the way up here so I can finally end it all. All these years of vagrancy and fugue, exile and fear. This is where it's all going to come to an end. But for now, I am enjoying the view of the valley unfolding below. I am sipping the air of what could be my final memories. He will show up soon. He always does. Like a shadow, he's been following me right on my footsteps, always there, behind me. And there he is. His limping figure appears behind the sharp bend off El Jardinito. He looks up and he sees me, then stops for a moment to catch his breath and leans on his cane, as if assessing the remaining trajectory for this final stretch, then resumes his walk. Or should I say, resumes his agonizing trudging. Years of endless chase took a toll on his body. No wonder. How long has he been chasing me? 10, 20, 30 years? He is slow, methodically slow. But for once, I will not run. I will wait. Right here behind this rock, I will finally come face to face with him. This sharp Swiss knife blade I am holding in my hand will soon lance right through his neck bone. Yes, that's what I am going to do. This ends here, at the dead end of this sandy trail atop the hill overlooking the valley with its white chapels and muscat orchards. Funny, after all these years, I still don't know the real name of my chaser. I always called him what Master Borges called him. He who wanders. He who wanders, listen. I will kill you. Borges. The Borges. I idolized him when I was in college. Many did, but I was different. It was 1961. I was an average lazy learner at the Universidad Laboral de Córdoba, floating around from one semester to another with barely passable grades. I had very few friends and almost no interests. One can say that I had an early form of an identity crisis. Besides chugging in asado, my only other passion was literature. Latin American literature. Borges and Neruda were at the forefront. One could only imagine my excitement when I saw a pamphlet hanging on the wall of the literature faculty. Spaces were limited. But who cared? It was the man himself, Jorge Luis Borges, coming to give us a lecture followed by an open panel of questions. Like a maniac, I rushed to the auditorium hours before the lecture. I was the first in line, and when the doors opened, I got the front row seat. The auditorium was packed with drooling chins of young self-proclaimed prodigies, awaiting the arrival of the Great One. And there he was, the blind lord of literature, walking upright onto the stage with a cane and his loyal assistant right by his side. Standing ovation. He nodded and made a "thank you, please be seated" gesture. Then he began. The lecture was dedicated to Spanish writers. I cannot distinctly recall if it was Cervantes or de Vega. It truly made no difference. Somehow, I managed to sit through his entire lecture, which lasted over 3 hours, and remember nothing. He talked slowly and methodically, pouring honey into our ears like Segovia's guitar, with his absent eyesight affixed on the ceiling. And then it happened, something that caught me completely off guard. Before closing the day, Borges was about to take questions from the audience. Of course, I raised my hand, and so did about hundreds of other students. One of Borges' assistants whispered something into his ear, which made him smile. It is an honor for me to be in front of an audience of young people, but our time is not infinite, he said with blind eyes still pinned on the far corner of the hall. For that reason, I will randomly pick questions from 5 of you. I have never won any prizes or lotteries in my life. When I played poker or blackjack, I lost far more than I won. I knew my limitations, and that turned me into an average apathetic person, rarely trying to outdo oneself. And so, sitting still with little ambition, I got used to that. Until that moment, when I saw Borges pointing his finger in my direction, that came as nothing short of a shock. Me? Yes, young man. Senor Borges picked you. Step forward and introduce yourself, said his assistant. I did not know what to ask, so I quietly mumbled my full name. Fernandez Agustin Navarro. Borges shifted his gray-shaded pupils in my direction, as if reacting to a sudden buzzing of a fruit fly. Fernandez Agustin Navarro. Navarro. Haven't I met you once before, young man? He asked. No, Senor Borges. I never had the honor. But you will. We will meet again, Senor Navarro. You and I will meet again. But for right now, what is your question? The rest of the day was foggy. I don't even remember what question I asked. It must have been about him winning the Prix International. Not sure. And maybe not important. No, not important at all. The greatest writer in the history of mankind called me by name, and then that bizarre, unreal thing he said about us meeting again. When? 9 years later, in 1970, and there I was, a somewhat promising journalist in one of London's somewhat scandalous tabloid newspapers. Every week my name was featured on the second page, alongside with celebrity chronicles and vile rumors. My paycheck was decent enough for a small studio flat by Manchester Square. After years of having been pent up by directionless studies, you could say I became something more than an average. Or at least that is what I believed. That day, it was early October, arguably the best season in London, began as usual. I ate my chic breakfast consisting of 2 scrambled eggs, ham, toast, and dark roast coffee at Barrymore's Diner, and was ready for a pleasant walk to the office. It was shortly after 8 a.m., and I was in no hurry. My route was the same as it was every day. Past the square, right turn on George Street, left turn on Thayer, another right on Marylebone. My thoughts that morning were all preoccupied with the piece I was working on, so I was slowly making my way through the square when something caught my eye. Or rather, someone. At first, I did not pay much attention to him, no more than I did to anybody else who idled at the square that morning. Hippie rascals with soiled hair playing guitar on every corner was a common theme in those days, and London town was certainly no exception. So here was another one of those misunderstood love proclaimers, sitting right behind the gated area of the square. Striped worn-out jacket, heavy cap, sandals with clots of woolen socks sticking out. A common hippie bum as anyone may have thought. I thought so too, except this one had something that made my intestines churn. I didn't know what it was, but once I saw him, I felt the irresistible urge to instantly walk away and never see him again. The way he looked at me, that gloomy frown that made me think of a line from Oscar Wilde, "That fellow's got to swing." There certainly was something outer-worldly about that fellow. His eyes, as if carved from a rock below his forehead, were mercilessly drilling thousands of tiny holes through me. I added pace. As I turned back one last time, I noticed him slowly walking towards me, past the gates of the square, onto the street, paying no attention to screeching tires of honking cars. Walking right towards me. He's just a bum. No, he is not. Just another one of those unwashed hippies. No, run. George Street was empty like in post-war bomb quarters. I could hear my brisk footsteps. Or was it the drubbing of my aorta against the chest? He was catching up. Run? Don't be silly. Yes, run. First slowly, as if you're trying to not show your chaser that you're scared. No, not scared. More like in a hurry. Why am I running? I can take him out with one punch. But it really wasn't about that. It was my first experience of that feeling, which I can only describe as some sort of primordial sense of fear. Panic. Dread. Unexplained sense of looming doom arching above you like a dark figure with a scythe. I ran. I ran faster than my feet could move. As I turned the corner on Thayer, I paused and looked back, fearing to see him right behind. Scrambled eggs, toast, and dark roast coffee were about to make their way back up through my esophagus. Wiping the sweat off my palms onto my pants, I bent forward in a protective position and looked around. Empty windows of George Street were checking me out like a toddler witnessing parent in a cowardly act. Whoever that man was that incensed me into this uncontrollable panic, he was now gone. Shame on you, Fernandez Agustin. I repeated to myself while making futile attempts to enthrall palpitation to subside. Shame on you. I mumbled, repeating that word. Mumbling turned into whistling that song, by magic lanterns. Shame, shame. I whistled, acting calm and self-composed. I sang without knowing words, only to convert my mind to something else. I sang so others wouldn't notice me shaking. I climbed the stairs of my office building, 3 at a time. 3rd floor. The familiar smell of typography oils calmed me down. Safe heaven. Shame on you, Fernandez Augustine Navarro. Even now I question myself whether my journey to madness began on that day, or was it underway for many years? Madness that creeps in and recedes in tidal waves. Is that how it usually happens? All I know is that an hour later I was laughing at my little moment of weaknesses. Preposterous and rubbish. My thick Andalusian twang spoke to me. The idea of being fully checked out by a specialist did cross my mind, and I immediately thought of Dr. Patel in Camden Town. He'd give me a comfortable medical diagnosis like a panic attack and prescribe some white pills, I thought. Little did I know that the day had more surprises in store. The unnerving script development continued in a more eerie fashion when my boss marched to my desk with a pack of printed paper. No, Navarro, you are not going to see Dr. Patel in Camden Town, who will make a judgment call on your insanity. Instead, you're going to do an article on Jorge Luis Borges' new book. He is making his presentation today at London Public Library, and blah, blah, blah. I forgot about the panic attack. The thrill of seeing Master Borges again, 9 years later, was surreal. Moments later, I was sitting in a cab on my way to the London Public Library, scribbling all possible questions I should be asking him. El Informe de Brody? Other books? Forget it. I knew very well what I would ask. I paid the cab and galloped up the marble stairs leading to the hallway, where the master was about to hold his new book presentation. I elbowed myself through the crowd of journalists to occupy the coveted front row spot. Quick inventory check. Wallet, J-sack along with the omnipresent Swiss knife. Seconds ticked leisurely on my wristwatch. For more minutes. Forget this morning sickness. Forget Dr. Patel. Collect yourself, Fernandez Augustine. Navarro, that's your last name, isn't it? Yes, Senor Borges. But how do you? 9 years ago, in Cordoba, I told you we would meet again. Do you remember? I nodded rapidly, completely forgetting he couldn't see me. Stupid. Perhaps, continued Borges, it would be more prudent for us to speak privately after the conference. I invite you to have coffee with me. You like Colombian coffee, Mr. Navarro? I shall see you precisely at 6 o'clock at the address that my assistant will provide. His blind eyes were still affixed at the top far corner of the hallway, far above all the congested sharp-penciled critics and arduous followers of his divine writing. The attention was now all on me, as revealed by hundreds of photo flashes from behind. I thought of all the explaining that I would have to do tomorrow. How does Borges know you? Are you friends? You were raised in Cordova. Are you his illegitimate son? Back then I did not know. Answers came later. Memory is a tricky animal. As I gaze over the valley and satiate my lungs with familiar smells, I cannot think of anything specific. Vague and elusive memories of my childhood home. And these orchards, these white chapels, and the old town itself. Nothing but an incomprehensible sensation somewhere down there, below the chest cage. I close my eyes and let the sun twirl around with tinted specks of mosaic light. I'm trying to focus without looking. Alas, nothing comes to mind. I've been robbed of my memory. You. I cast my eyes at the trail again. He is closing in. It's hard for him to walk upward. And yet I see that determination in his eyes, in his tight grip of that wobbly walking stick, in the way he periodically stops to catch his breath and eyeball the remaining distance. I'm not going anywhere. 5? 10 more minutes? Come and take me, old man, if you can. I almost see his facial expression under the heavily pronounced frontal lobe. It's a grin. It's an expression that says, "We shall see." Once I read an interview in the Morning Times. In it, Borges was portrayed as extremely humble and minimalistic. His house was depicted as a perfectly organized space with easy access to everything. Books on the shelves, judging from the admiration of the columnist, there were lots of them, were organized by theme and by title. Dictionaries and encyclopedias were grouped together on the same rack, so he could find them easily. In another article, dated 1966, I read that when Borges travels, and those travels were quite extensive, he carries a whole rack of books along, some of which may not even be read. When I entered his hotel room, that very book rack was the first thing that caught my eye. I stood perplexed at the multitude of titles, most unknown to me, when I heard the door swing wide open, and there he was entering through the doorway with a leisurely swinging cane. "Ah, Senor Navarro, how kind of you to visit this old man." I took a step towards him and produced some gibberish like "pleasure is all but mine." He half smiled and pointed his hand to the chair. "I know you will quite enjoy the taste of Colombian dark roast." Borges sat down and leaned slightly backwards, without releasing his cane. "Do you know the biggest advantage of being blind?" he asked and answered immediately. "Blind don't need light, so my utility bills are way lower." He laughed at his own joke, only to be interrupted by his assistant, carrying a tray of aromatic coffee poured in 2 small porcelain cups. Amazing how the very idea of drinking coffee instantly changes your mood before you even take your first sip. As I was readying to go on a pre-scripted monologue of expressing my gratitude and honor, Borges jumped right into the action. "I will get right to it, Senor Navarro, about you being here and about me remembering you. I know you have many questions. I will attempt to answer some, but not all. When you leave this hotel, there will still be some questions that you will have to find answers to, on your own." He gently picked his cup of coffee and, with hands somewhat shaking, took an artistic sip. Yes, I had questions. So many that my brain membranes were buzzing in bewilderment and disbelief. Here I was sitting in the room with one of the greatest writers who happened to mysteriously know my name and... "Have you by any chance read The Book of Imaginary Beings?" asked Borges. "I have. Many times. I read it in Spanish when it just came out. Very recently I bought the English translation in some shabby bookstore off Oxford Circus. I read that book far too many times, but never in its entirety, mostly starting on a random page, just as Borges had intended it to be consumed by his readers. You see, Senor Navarro, that book was, and perhaps still is, a never-ending work in progress as human imagination has no boundaries. I have included what I had researched over 10 years ago, then recently expanded and republished with more figments of collective human imagination. But the book is merely a small subset. In a way, the book writes itself. In some form, it's a labyrinth, an endless one, a living one, where every corridor and every room is never the same. What I had always wanted is the book to reflect the labyrinth in our collective subconsciousness, the force that drives our minds to craft. For that reason, all the creatures in my book are strictly fictional, mythical. Am I not boring you? Not at all. I understand, Senor Borges. He nodded and wiped a coffee grind off his nose. That book, as its title implies, is all about imaginary beings. Tales, legends, folklore. But one thing that no one knows is that I had originally intended this book to include one more being, a being that goes by its Latin name, Quietus Estate. It appeared and disappeared across many cultures, sometimes centuries apart. Very little is known of it, but what I found was indeed astonishing. First, this being is physically no different than an ordinary human. You may say, it is human in many ways. As I studied this entity, I became more and more agitated. I could not stop. Like a madman, I was trying to learn more and more, but very soon the excitement turned into another feeling. Fear. Fear of what, Senor Borges? Borges' eyesight shifted from the corner of the room straight on me, as if he could perfectly see me. Fear of what I had uncovered. That Quietus Estate is not a myth at all. He attempted to take another sip, but his hand started shaking, so he had to put the cup down, spilling some of it on the saucer and around the table. Pardon me, young man, I'm trying to maintain composure. But you have not tried the coffee, he said, wiping his mouth and forehead with a knitted handkerchief. I raised the small cup and took a sip, disregarding the aromatic fumes of Colombian beans drifting down my internal gorges. Pardon me, sir, but you were saying that the imaginary being called Quietus Estate was not imaginary. Is that why you decided not to include him in your book of imaginary beings? Only in part. Fear came from the realization of what it would mean for mankind to know about its existence. You see, it's no secret that we are all well aware of our eventual demise. We all die. But imagine what would happen if we all stared right into the face of death every single day of our lives and knew the time that was left for us in this world. Death not as a vague concept portrayed by middle-aged artists, not as a folklore tale of a grim reaper, but as a real living entity that stalks you and walks around showing you a ticking clock counting down minutes and seconds, getting closer to you with every second, trying to grab your hand. Running from death is worse than death itself. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. But I shall talk no more. Allow me to give you my scribbles from years ago. These are unedited in their raw format, so please pardon the poor language. It's right there in the drawer. You will find a folder with a yellow piece of paper. Read it aloud while my ripe old body attempts to catch a breath. I opened the drawer, as he instructed, and found a yellow piece of cursive handwritings carved in Spanish with some Latin phrases. The scribbles were short, less than a page long with marks and scratches, but most of this was very much decipherable. He must have written this himself half-blind, I thought. What caused him to do that and not dictate to his assistant? I unfolded the paper and began reading. It is said that one shall not know about its own ways and times of demise. The imminent passing is only felt by those that are either terminally ill, and even so, they don't possess the knowledge of when and where, or by death row inmates awaiting the exact day and time of their execution. Lack of such knowledge coerces us to exist. Sumerians believed in a certain deity. The word deity was scratched and replaced with demon of death embodied in human flesh and bones, which again was scratched and replaced with entity, whose sole role was to stalk its victims and inform them of how much time they have left to live. For the ancient Book of Dead, which was discovered as a set of clay tablets, typically buried in corpses, only those that are luminous can see the deity, again crossed out twice, replaced with demon, then with entity. The luminous ones are thought to be either people with high spiritual powers or vice versa, the cursed ones condemned by priests. The reference briefly reappears in some Egyptian manuscripts, but in later writings is replaced by Anubis or, in rare occurrences, by Horus. The writings again depict this unnamed being as an eternal human who never sleeps but always wanders. What's strange is that neither Sumerians nor Egyptians ever gave the entity a discrete name. However, the latter rare findings during Dark Ages refer to him as Quietus Estate. The only depiction of Quietus Estate was that of an ordinary human standing next to a sun clock, which was used to measure the time that the Chosen One had left to live. From time to time, Quietus Estate stalks the Chosen One and, when cornered, moves hands of the clock forward to shorten the lifetime. If the Chosen One cannot escape, then his time eventually runs out. The very last reference was found in. Enough, Mr. Navarro. You understand the idea. Now on to the main question. Why are you here? He drew closer, and a dull shadow from a lamp cut right through his elongated forehead. Quietus Estate is an eternal wanderer who is always with us, the timekeeper who sits at the edge of the stage with a ticking watch on his wrist. The greatest gift given to mankind is its inability to see him. When I lost sight, I thought blindness was a blessing in disguise. But one does not require eyes to see the wanderer. What eyes cannot see, ears can hear, and skin can feel. I hear him. I feel him. You are here, Mr. Navarro, because you and I are the luminous ones. Orgs paused and asked me with a trembling voice. Mr. Navarro, you saw him too, didn't you? Cold shivers that have been accumulating in my lower back rushed up my spinal cord in millions of explosions. Nausea formed a massive ball of air in my throat, and for a moment I struggled to breathe. Desperately trying to cease the thumping inside, I pushed words out. I saw him today. How do you get used to the notion of being a passerby on this earth? Ordinary humans do not have to get used to that. We have that built-in protection layer, that safety cork in our brain membranes that separates the realization of being mortal from flooding down upon us. It allows us to breathe the air. It lets us exhibit this extraordinary, yet sacred carelessness. The mental block that denies the laws of life on a primitive emotional level even for the keenest scholars. The indecipherable tetragrammaton is shown to us in every step we take, in every cup of Colombian coffee we sip, in every word of wisdom that we collect from books. Every second we bypass the sinister tick-tock and hear the name of the God being whispered into our ears. And yet we, humans, turn around and whistle, shame, shame, deceiving our own self-cognizance. And that, as Senor Bohr has called it, is the true blessing. Those who possess the name of the divine being are doomed. Knowledge is madness. Knowledge is inexistence. Knowledge of death is worse than death. We sat in his hotel room until early morning, the two luminous and doomed souls. Our casual exchange of words was amplified by the ticking of the clock. It was dawn when I noticed Borges nodding in his sleep. His left hand was still resting on the cane, and his pupils were shuffling behind shut eyelids. Borges was dreaming. So must have I. As I was exiting the foyer of the hotel, I hid behind a column and looked around the street. It was empty. Bleak light of street lamps drew strange crossbeams on pavements. Early October leaves were gyring in closed circles like witches around the fire. I was looking around, hoping to not see him. He wasn't there, but he was. I felt his presence not very far from me. Muscat orchards. They resonate inside like echoes of a guitar string heard from a deep alcove, but nothing particular comes to mind. I'm trying to shift focus from one object to another, but my nomad memory is lost in endless labyrinths. You took my memories away from me, didn't you? Wait, mortal. Wait 5 more minutes, and you will know the answer, I hear in my brain. He is talking to me now. I can see how the long uphill walk is wearing him out. But what are pain and tiredness when you're crossing the finish line? As Borges warned me, do not ever come close to him. Do not look him straight in the eyes. He will always be near. His watch will be ticking. If he attempts to catch on, run, but he will forever follow. In a way, he will be like a shadow of you. And I ran, and he wandered. I evaded. He followed. He came too close to me in my hotel room on the second day after my long night in Borges' quarters. The fool in me still thought that escaping from him would be as easy as moving into a new flat or checking into a hotel. So I did just that. It was some shabby hotel minutes from my work where I decided to spend a few nights just to think things through. That evening, and I remember every minute of it, was my first face-to-face encounter with him. My room, B6, was on the basement level. As I stumbled through the dark hotel corridor, trying to find the key to my room, I felt his presence. But my ignorant foolishness dismissed all mental warnings and turned the keys. As the door hinge squeaked, I took my first step into the hotel room. A street-level window was casting 2 thick yellow streaks of light on the floor carpet. I smelled dust and spider webs. He was in my room, sitting on the edge of the bed with a rope in his hand. A thin white blanket was covering his head like a shroud around a statue. I stood in a stupor like a paralyzed insect. An avalanche of sweat gushed from every pore of my body. With hand twisted behind my back, I was feverishly trying to twist the doorknob. He got up from the bed with a groan. He took a step towards me, hand too sweaty to turn the knob. Open it. Open. He grabbed my wrist. Open. Run. The stretched corridor of the hotel basement flashed like random shots of a silent movie. Run. B5. B2. B1. Run. Staircase. Up. Exit. Run. Your time is coming, Fernandez Augustine Navarro. A whisper crawled into my ears. Coming, coming, hissed the wind. I ran until my legs gave in. I fell down somewhere in the outskirts of the town, passing out in an alley amidst rubbish until sunup. My madness has begun. In the days following my first face-to-face encounter with Quietus Estate, I've moved out of my London flat. I had some savings, enough to tramp town to town, continent to continent, doing temp jobs here and there, sometimes sleeping on streets. He was right behind me. Even if I didn't see him for a month, I knew he would soon catch on. It would be only a matter of time for him to pop up somewhere, on the opposite side of the street, in the next car over on the subway, or madly prying through shutters of windows in the house across. My attempts to speak to Borges were futile. How does the blind master live with this curse? I wondered. How does he manage to evade his sinister follower? I had questions, far more than I had anticipated, but Senor Borges was already on the other side of the globe. I wrote him letters. He never replied. I tried calling hotels where he stayed. Unavailable. The books that he wrote, I bought all of them in attempts to find hidden meanings. What if he had secret messages for me inside his writings? The Book of Sand, Dr. Brody's report. I even searched his earlier writings, analyzed every word. Pointless. Futile. Until 1983. Shakespeare's Memory. His final book, as it turned out to be. I was somewhere in Eastern Europe when I bought the book. Immediately I began my scrupulous study. letter by letter, page by page, analyzing every space and every punctuation sign. And that's when I found it. The answer. The answer was the story itself. The story that did not require much study or decryption. All I had to do was read it. I knew I had to come face to face with Quietus' state like Borges did, but not before having to go through the life of an exile. That's what Borges had intended me to do. Such was his final and only message to me embodied within his last story. A story written for the public, but intended for my eyes only. The story was that the protagonist receives memories of Shakespeare, memories that overwhelm him, overpowering his own. He forgets modern-day cars and engines, instead remembering faces and names from some distant past, memories he has never known, memories that belong to another man. In a way, he will be like a shadow of you, Borges told me that night. Slowly but surely, my shadow was becoming me. That's why I can only vaguely remember you, my childhood home. Him or me, no more running. It ends here. Few more minutes, I say to myself as I look at the watch. There he is. He is out of breath, beaten, tired and bent by the weight of his own arid body. One last push, old man, and we will meet. I am hiding behind the rock, his footsteps on gravel and sand. I can tell them from any other footsteps in the world. His breathing, wheezing and crackling. I am counting to 5. He knows where I am, but he is too tired to take that last step. Let me take that step for you. I am staring at his face, wrinkled like leaves of an ancient scroll. Time's up, Quietus' state, I am telling him. He is not fighting back, and my Swiss blade finds a comfy spot below his Adam's apple. I'm gonna finish him now. Popping sounds are coming out from his flabby throat. What are you trying to tell me, old man? Let me hear your last words. I am easing the pressure to let him talk, but the sounds that come out not words, but laughter. You are confused, he says. You got it all wrong. Let me help you understand. I'm letting him sit up. He is coughing blood. One wrong move, and he's dead. He wipes the blood off his lips and nods in understanding. All my life I have followed you, he begins slowly. It's a miracle I have come this far and lived this long. Ever since I left Cordoba, I was a ticking time bomb. I was diagnosed as suicidal. Doctor after doctor, therapies, specialists, prescription, yoga. I have tried them all, some help for a while, and the disease subsided, but then trolled back with a new, stronger wave. It's this disease that nests here, and he points to his head, forcing me to look for a way to end my own life. It all began in London, on that morning when I was sitting on the bench in the middle of that square, feeling the disease gnawing on my brain. My first attempt was in that hotel, room B6. I sat on the bed in that dark room for hours with a rope in my hand and a blanket over my head. Death opened the door and stood above me in the darkness of the room. Oh, how I wanted my pain to end, but it was not meant to be. Not then, not there. I had to live on. Ever since that day, it was a cat and a mouse game between us. I chased death, and death would always slip away. Until now. He pauses, rubbing his flabby neck, then points his finger down the valley and continues. I was born in that house. I remember every moment of my childhood. My parents, my toys, my school. I remember playing hide and seek with my cousins in Muscat Gardens and dosing off to Sunday clergy in that white chapel. I remember Eastern rugs being washed on the street and the smell of grapes. My name is Fernandez August Navarro. And you have no true name, but they call you Quietus Estate, the one who wanders. Filaments of scorching infernos have been ignited all over me. The fire sets off inside my eyelids, spreading over to all facial pores and trickling down my body. Lies. Imbecile lies. I roar. Look at me, he says. I am an old man. And you? Still young and strong, as you will always be. You have not aged. Now think more. What do you remember of your childhood? Shakespearean memories of random sounds and smells are all you have gained from me. Master Borges knew who you were. He cracked you, and then he tricked you. He made you think you were me. That was his way of evading you. By not revealing you the truth until his final breath, final book, final story. You are the one who wanders. And those memories you have, those are my memories. And now that I have told you who you really are, you must finally finish me. I have heard enough of his fibs. I'm throwing my knife away. I shall not require any blades to finish him. With hands clenched around his thin neck, I am strangling him. I hear him squeal as the grip tightens. I feel the crackling of neck bones between my thumbs. I see him gulping the air in warm convulsions. He looks peaceful. I sit on his chest and watch his last breath picked up by the wind, carried down the valley to the gardens, passing by the white chapel and the house where he grew up. The scorching wind of Andalusia is pouring sunlight onto his face, toying with eyelashes, pounding on cheeks and gyring through hair. He must have missed the smell of the valley and the ripening softness of muscat fluff glistening in the air. I am rewinding my wristwatch and walking downhill along the wavy trail, my thumbs still sore from killing. I am taking small steps sideways. Once I reach El Jardinito Road, I will hop on the first bus, and from there I will travel west. Or north. Destination will never matter. Anywhere is where the roads take me. Me, the one who wanders. Sunday. I'm not sure why I'm writing this down on paper and not on my computer. I guess I've just noticed some odd things. It's not that I don't trust the computer. I just need to organize my thoughts. I need to get down all the details somewhere objective. Somewhere I know that what I write can't be deleted or changed. Not that that's happened. It's just everything blurs together here, and the fog of memory lends a strange cast to things. I'm starting to feel cramped in this small apartment. Maybe that's the problem. I just had to go and choose the cheapest apartment, the only one in the basement. The lack of windows down here makes day and night seem to slip by seamlessly. I haven't been out in a few days because I've been working on this programming project so intensively. I suppose I just wanted to get it done. Hours of sitting and staring at a monitor can make anyone feel strange, I know, but I don't think that's it. I'm not sure when I first started to feel like something was odd. I can't even define what it is. Maybe I just haven't talked to anyone in a while. That's the first thing that crept up on me. Everyone I normally talk to online while I program has been idle, or they've simply not logged on at all. My instant messages go unanswered. The last email I got from anybody was a friend saying he'd talk to me when he got back from the store, and that was yesterday. I call with my cell phone, but reception's terrible down here. Yeah, that's it. I just need to call someone. I'm gonna go outside. Well, that didn't work so well. As the tingle of fear fades, I'm feeling a little ridiculous for being scared at all. I looked in the mirror before I went out, but I didn't shave the 2-day stubble I've grown. I figured I was just going out for a quick cell phone call. I did change my shirt though, because it was lunchtime, and I guessed that I'd run into at least one person I knew. That didn't end up happening. I wish it did. When I went out, I opened the door to my small apartment slowly. A small feeling of apprehension had somehow already lodged itself in me, for some indefinable reason. I chalked it up to having not spoken to anyone but myself for a day or two. I peered down the dingy gray hallway, made dingier by the fact that it was a basement hallway. On one end, a large metal door led to the building's furnace room. It was locked, of course. 2 dreary soda machines stood by it. I bought a soda from one the first day I moved in, but it had a 2-year-old expiration date. I'm fairly sure nobody knows those machines are even down here, or my cheap landlady just doesn't care to get them restocked. I closed my door softly and walked the other direction, taking care not to make a sound. I have no idea why I chose to do that, but it was fun giving in to the strange impulse not to break the droning hum of the soda machines, at least for the moment. I got to the stairwell and took the stairs up to the building's front door. I looked through the heavy door's small square window and received quite the shock. It was definitely not lunchtime. City gloom hung over the dark street outside, and the traffic lights at the intersection in the distance blinked yellow. Dim clouds, purple and black from the glow of the city, hung overhead. Nothing moved, save the few sidewalk trees that shifted in the wind. I remember shivering, though I wasn't cold. Maybe it was the wind outside. I could vaguely hear it through the heavy metal door, and I knew it was that unique kind of late-night wind, the kind that was constant, cold, and quiet, save for the rhythmic music it made as it passed through countless unseen tree leaves. I decided not to go outside. Instead, I lifted my cell phone to the door's little window and checked the signal meter. The bars filled up the meter, and I smiled. Time to hear someone else's voice. I remember thinking, relieved. It was such a strange thing to be afraid of nothing. I shook my head, laughing at myself silently. I hit speed dial for my best friend Amy's number and held the phone up to my ear. It rang once, but then it stopped. Nothing happened. I listened to silence for a good 20 seconds, then hung up. I frowned and looked at the signal meter again, still full. I went to dial her number again, but then my phone rang in my hand, startling me. I put it up to my ear. "Hello?" I asked, immediately fighting down a small shock at hearing the first spoken voice in days, even if it was my own. I had gotten used to the droning hum of the building's inner workings, my computer, and the soda machines in the hallway. There was no response to my greeting at first, but then, finally, a voice came. "Hey," said a clear male voice, obviously of college age, like me. "Who's this?" "John," I replied, confused. "Oh, sorry, wrong number," he replied, then hung up. I lowered the phone slowly and leaned against the thick brick wall of the stairwell. That was strange. I looked at my received calls list, but the number was unfamiliar. Before I could think on it further, the phone rang loudly, shocking me yet again. This time, I looked at the caller before I answered. It was another unfamiliar number. This time, I held the phone up to my ear, but said nothing. I heard nothing but the general background noise of a phone. Then, a familiar voice broke my tension. "John," was the single word in Amy's voice. I breathed a sigh of relief. "Hey, it's you," I replied. "Who else would it be?" she responded. "Oh, the number. I'm at a party on 7th Street, and my phone died just as you called me. This is someone else's phone, obviously." "Oh, okay," I said. "Where are you?" she asked. My eyes glanced over the drab whitewashed cylinder block walls and the heavy metal door with its small window. "At my building," I sighed, just feeling cooped up. I didn't realize it was so late. "You should come here," she said, laughing. "Nah, I don't feel like looking for some strange place by myself in the middle of the night," I said, looking out the window at the silent, windy street that secretly scared me just a tiny bit. "I think I'm just going to keep working or go to bed." "Nonsense," she replied. "I can come get you. Your building is close to 7th Street, right? How drunk are you?" I asked lightheartedly. "You know where I live." "Oh, of course," she said abruptly. "I guess I can't get there by walking, huh? You could if you wanted to waste half an hour," I told her. "Right," she said. "Okay. Have to go. Good luck with your work." I lowered the phone once more, looking at the numbers flash as the call ended. Then, the droning silence suddenly reasserted itself in my ears. The two strange calls and the eerie street outside just drove home my aloneness in this empty stairwell. Perhaps from having seen too many scary movies, I had the sudden, inexplicable idea that something could look in the door's window and see me, some sort of horrible entity that hovered at the edge of aloneness, just waiting to creep up on unsuspecting people that strayed too far from other human beings. I knew the fear was irrational, but nobody else was around, so I jumped down the stairs, ran down the hallway into my room, and closed the door as swiftly as I could while still staying silent. Like I said, I feel a little ridiculous for being scared of nothing, and the fear has already faded. Writing this down helps a lot. It makes me realize that nothing is wrong. It filters out half-formed thoughts and fears, and leaves only cold, hard facts. It's late, I got a call from a wrong number, and Amy's phone died, so she called me back from another number. Nothing strange is happening. Still, there was something a little off about that conversation. I know it could have just been the alcohol she'd had. Or was it even her that seemed off to me? Or was it, yes, that was it? I didn't realize it until this moment. Writing these things down. I knew writing things down would help. She said she was at a party, but I only heard silence in the background. Of course, that doesn't mean anything in particular, as she could have just gone outside to make the call. No, that couldn't be it either. I didn't hear the wind. I need to see if the wind is still blowing. Monday. I forgot to finish writing last night. I'm not sure what I expected to see when I ran up the stairwell and looked out the heavy metal door's window. I'm feeling ridiculous. Last night's fear seems hazy and unreasonable to me now. I can't wait to go out into the sunlight. I'm going to check my email, shave, shower, and finally get out of here. Wait, I think I heard something. It was thunder. That whole sunlight and fresh air thing didn't happen. I went out into the stairwell and up the stairs, only to find disappointment. The heavy metal door's little window showed only flowing water as torrential rain slammed against it. Only a very dim, gloomy light filtered in through the rain. But at least I knew it was daytime, even if it was a gray, sickly, wet day. I tried looking out the window and waiting for lightning to illuminate the gloom, but the rain was too heavy and I couldn't make out anything more than vague, weird shapes moving at odd angles in the waves washing down the window. Disappointed, I turned around, but I didn't want to go back to my room. Instead, I wandered further up the stairs, past the first floor and the second. The stairs ended at the third floor, the highest floor in the building. I looked through the glass that ran up the outer wall of the stairwell, but it was that warped, thick kind that scatters the light. Not that there was much to see through the rain to begin with. I opened the stairwell door and wandered down the hallway. The 10 or so thick wooden doors, painted blue a long time ago, were all closed. I listened as I walked, but it was the middle of the day, so I wasn't surprised that I heard nothing but the rain outside. As I stood there in the dim hallway, listening to the rain, I had the strange, fleeting impression that the doors were standing like silent granite monoliths erected by some ancient, forgotten civilization for some unfathomable guardian purpose. Lightning flashed, and I could have sworn that, for just a moment, the old grainy blue would look just like rough stone. I laughed at myself for letting my imagination get the best of me, but then it occurred to me that the dim gloom and lightning must mean there was a window somewhere in the hallway. A vague memory surfaced, and I suddenly recalled that the third floor had an alcove and an inset window halfway down the floor's hallway. Excited to look out into the rain and possibly see another human being, I quickly walked over to the alcove, finding the large, thin glass window. Rain washed down it, as with the front door's window, but I could open this one. I reached a hand out to slide it open, but hesitated. I had the strangest feeling that if I opened that window, I would see something absolutely horrifying on the other side. Everything's been so odd lately, so I came up with a plan, and I came back here to get what I needed. I don't seriously think anything will come of it, but I'm bored, it's raining, and I'm going stir crazy. I came back to get my webcam. The cord isn't long enough to reach the third floor by any means, so instead I'm going to hide it between the 2 soda machines in the dark end of my basement hallway, run the wire along the wall and under my door, and put black duct tape over the wire to blend it in with the black plastic strip that runs along the base of the hallway's walls. I know this is silly, but I don't have anything better to do. Well, nothing happened. I propped open the hallway to stairwell door, steeled myself, then flung the heavy front door wide open and ran like hell down the stairs to my room and slammed the door. I watched the webcam on my computer intently, seeing the hallway outside my door and most of the stairwell. I'm watching it right now, and I don't see anything interesting. I just wish the camera's position was different, so that I could see out the front door. Hey, somebody's online. I got out an older, less functional webcam that I had in my closet to video chat with my friend online. I couldn't really explain to him why I wanted a video chat, but it felt good to see another person's face. He couldn't talk very long, and we didn't talk about anything meaningful, but I feel much better. My strange fear is almost past. I would feel completely better, but there was something odd about our conversation. I know that I've said that everything has seemed odd, but still, he was very vague in his responses. I can't recall one specific thing that he said, no particular name, or place, or event, but he did ask for my email address to keep in touch. Wait, I just got an email. I'm about to go out. I just got an email from Amy that asked me to meet her for dinner at the place we usually go to. I do love pizza, and I've just been eating random food from my poorly stocked fridge for days, so I can't wait. Again, I feel ridiculous about the odd couple of days I've been having. I should destroy this journal when I get back. Oh, another email. Oh my God. I almost left the email and opened the door. I almost opened the door, but I read the email first. It was from a friend I hadn't heard from in a long time, and it was sent to a huge number of emails that must have been every person he had saved in his address list. It had no subject, and it said, simply, "Seen with your own eyes, don't trust them, they." What the hell is that supposed to mean? The words shock me, and I keep going over and over them. Is it a desperate email sent just as something happened? The words are obviously cut off without finishing. On any other day, I would have dismissed this as spam from a computer virus or something. But the words "seen with your own eyes," I can't help but read over this journal and think back on the last few days and realize that I have not seen another person with my own eyes or talked to another person face to face. The webcam conversation with my friend was so strange, so vague, so eerie now that I think about it. Was it eerie? Or is the fear clouding my memory? My mind toys with the progression of events I've written here. pointing out that I have not been presented with one single fact that I did not specifically give out unsuspectingly. The random wrong number that got my name and the subsequent strange return call from Amy, the friend that asked for my email address. I messaged him first when I saw him online, and then I got my first email a few minutes after that conversation. "Oh my God, that phone call with Amy," I said over the phone. I said that I was within half an hour's walk of 7th Street. They know I'm near there. What if they're trying to find me? Where is everyone else? Why haven't I seen or heard anyone else in days? No, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. I need to calm down. This madness needs to end. I don't know what to think. I ran about my apartment furiously, holding my cell phone up to every corner to see if it got a signal through the heavy walls. Finally, in the tiny bathroom, near one ceiling corner, I got a single bar. Holding my phone there, I sent a text message to every number in my list. Not wanting to betray anything about my unfounded fears, I simply sent, "You seen anyone face to face lately?" At that point, I just wanted any reply back. I didn't care what the reply was, or if I embarrassed myself. I tried to call someone a few times, but I couldn't get my head up high enough, and if I brought my cell phone down even an inch, it lost signal. Then I remembered the computer and rushed over to it, instant messaging everyone online. Most were idle or away from their computer. Nobody responded. My messages grew more frantic, and I started telling people where I was and to stop by in person for a host of barely passable reasons. I didn't care about anything by that point. I just needed to see another person. I also tore apart my apartment looking for something that I might have missed, some way to contact another human being without opening the door. I know it's crazy, I know it's unfounded, but what if? What if? I just need to be sure. I taped the phone to the ceiling in case. Tuesday. The phone rang. Exhausted from last night's rampage, I must have fallen asleep. I woke up to the phone ringing and ran into the bathroom, stood on the toilet, and flipped open the phone taped to the ceiling. It was Amy, and I feel so much better. She was really worried about me, and apparently had been trying to contact me since the last time I talked to her. She's coming over now, and yes, she knows where I am without me telling her. I feel so embarrassed. I am definitely throwing this journal away before anyone sees it. I don't even know why I'm writing in it now. Maybe it's just because it's the only communication I've had at all since God knows when. I look like hell too. I looked in the mirror before I came back in here. My eyes are sunken, my stubble is thicker, and I just look generally unhealthy. My apartment is trashed, but I'm not going to clean it up. I think I need someone else to see what I've been through. These past few days have not been normal. I'm not one to imagine things. I know I have been the victim of extreme probability. I probably missed seeing another person a dozen times. I just happened to go out when it was late at night, or the middle of the day when everyone was gone. Everything's perfectly fine, I know this now. Plus, I found something in the closet last night that has helped me tremendously. A television. I set it up just before I wrote this, and it's on in the background. Television has always been an escape for me, and it reminds me that there's a world beyond these dingy brick walls. I'm glad Amy's the only one that responded to me after last night's frantic pestering of everyone I could contact. She's been my best friend for years. She doesn't know it, but I count the day that I met her among one of the few moments of true happiness in my life. I remember that warm summer day fondly. It seems a different reality from this dark, rainy, lonely place. I feel like I spent days sitting in that playground, much too old to play, just talking with her and hanging around doing nothing at all. I still feel like I can go back to that moment sometimes. And it reminds me that this damn place is not all that there is. Finally a knock on the door. I thought it was odd that I couldn't see her through the camera I hid between the two soda machines. I figured that it was bad positioning, like when I couldn't see out the front door. I should have known. I should have known. After the knock, I yelled through the door jokingly that I had a camera between the soda machines, because I was embarrassed myself that I had taken this paranoia so far. After I did that, I saw her image walk over to the camera and look down at it. She smiled and waved. "Hey," she said to the camera brightly, giving it a wry look. "It's weird, I know," I said into the mic attached to my computer. "I've had a weird few days." "Must have," she replied. "Open the door, John." I hesitated. How could I be sure? "Hey, humor me a second here," I told her through the mic. "Tell me one thing about us. Just prove to me you're you." She gave the camera a weird look. Alright," she said slowly, thinking. We met randomly at a playground when we were both way too old to be there. I sighed deeply as reality returned and fear faded. God, I'd been so ridiculous. Of course it was Amy. That day wasn't anywhere in the world except in my memory. I'd never even mentioned it to anyone, not out of embarrassment, but out of a strange, secret nostalgia and a longing for those days to return. If there was some unknown force at work trying to trick me, as I feared, there was no way they could know about that day. Haha, all right, I'll explain everything, I told her. Be right there. I ran to my small bathroom and fixed my hair as best I could. I looked like hell, but she would understand. Snickering at my own unbelievable behavior and the mess I'd made of the place, I walked to the door. I put my hand on the doorknob and gave the mess one last look. So ridiculous, I thought. My eyes traced over the half-eaten food lying on the ground, the overflowing trash bin, and the bed I'd tipped to the side looking for. God knows what. I almost turned to the door and opened it, but my eyes fell on one last thing. The old webcam, the one I used for that eerily vacant chat with my friend. Its silent black sphere lay haphazardly tossed to the side, its lens pointed at the table where this journal lay. An overwhelming terror took me as I realized that if something could see through that camera, it would have seen what I just wrote about that day. I asked her for any one thing about us, and she chose the only thing in the world that I thought they or did not know, but IT did. It didn't know. It could have been watching me the whole time. I didn't open the door. I screamed. I screamed in uncontrollable terror. I stomped on the old webcam on the floor. The door shook, and the doorknob tried to turn, but I didn't hear Amy's voice through the door. Was the basement door made to keep out drafts? Too thick? Or was Amy not outside? What could have been trying to get in if not her? What the hell is out there? I saw her on my computer through the camera outside. I heard her on the speakers through the camera outside. But was it real? How can I know? She's gone now, I screamed and shouted for help. I piled up everything in my apartment against the front door. Friday. At least I think that it's Friday. I broke everything electronic. I smashed my computer to pieces. Every single thing on there could have been accessed by network access, or worse, altered. I'm a programmer. I know. Every little piece of information I gave out since this started. My name, my email, my location. None of it came back from outside until I gave it out. I've been going over and over what I wrote. I've been pacing back and forth, alternating between stark terror and overpowering disbelief. Sometimes I'm absolutely certain some phantom entity is dead set on the simple goal of getting me to go outside. Back to the beginning, with the phone call from Amy, she was effectively asking me to open the door and go outside. I keep running through it in my head. One point of view says I've acted like a madman, and all of this is the extreme convergence of probability. Never going outside at the right times by pure luck, never seeing another person by pure chance, getting a random nonsense email from some computer virus at just the right time. The other point of view says that extreme convergence of probability is the reason that whatever's out there hasn't gotten me already. I keep thinking, I never opened the window on the third floor. I never opened the front door until that incredibly stupid stunt with the hidden camera, after which I ran straight to my room and slammed the door. I haven't opened my own solid door since I flung open the front door of the building. Whatever's out there, if anything's out there, never made an appearance in the building before I opened the front door. Maybe the reason it wasn't in the building already was that it was elsewhere getting everyone else. And then it waited until I betrayed my existence by trying to call Amy, a call which didn't work until it called me and asked me my name. Terror literally overwhelms me every time I try to fit the pieces of this nightmare together. That email, short, cut off. Was it from someone trying to get word out? Some friendly voice desperately trying to warn me before it came? Seen with my own eyes, don't trust them. Exactly what I've been so suspicious of. It could have masterful control of all things electronic, practicing its insidious deception to trick me into coming outside. Why can't it get in? It knocked on the door. It must have some solid presence. The door, the image of those doors in the upper hallway as guardian monoliths flashes back in my mind every time I trace this path of thoughts. If there is some phantom entity trying to get me to go outside, maybe it can't get through doors. I keep thinking back over all the books I've read or movies I've seen, trying to generate some explanation for this. Doors have always been such intense foci of human imagination. always seen as wards or portals of special importance. Or perhaps the door is just too thick. I know that I couldn't bash through any of the doors in this building, let alone the heavy basement ones. Aside from that, the real question is, why does it even want me? If it just wanted to kill me, it could do it any number of ways, including just waiting until I starve to death. What if it doesn't want to kill me? What if it has some far more horrific fate in store for me? God, what can I do to escape this nightmare? A knock on the door. I told the people on the other side of the door, I need a minute to think and I'll come out. I'm really just writing this down so I can figure out what to do. At least this time I heard their voices. My paranoia, and yes, I recognize I'm being paranoid, has me thinking of all sorts of ways that their voices could be faked electronically. There could be nothing but speakers outside, simulating human voices. Did it really take them 3 days to come talk to me? Amy is supposedly out there, along with 2 policemen and a psychiatrist. Maybe it took them 3 days to think of what to say to me. The psychiatrist's claim could be pretty convincing if I decided to think this has all been a crazy misunderstanding and not some entity trying to trick me into opening the door. The psychiatrist had an older voice, authoritarian but still caring. I liked it. I'm desperate just to see someone with my own eyes. He said I have something called psychosis, and I'm just one of a nationwide epidemic of thousands of people having breakdowns triggered by a suggestive email that got through somehow. I swear he said, got through somehow. I think he means spread throughout the country inexplicably, but I'm incredibly suspicious that the entity slipped up and revealed something. He said I am part of a wave of emergent behavior, that a lot of other people are having the same problem with the same fears, even though we've never communicated. That neatly explains the strange email about eyes that I got. I didn't get the original triggering email. I got a descendant of it. My friend could have broken down too, and tried to warn everyone he knew against his paranoid fears. That's how the problem spreads, the psychiatrist claims. I could have spread it too with my texts and instant messages online to everybody I know. One of those people might be melting down right now, after being triggered by something I sent them, something they might interpret any way that they want, something like a text saying seen anyone face to face lately. The psychiatrist told me that he didn't want to lose another one, that people like me are intelligent, and that's our downfall. We draw connections so well that we draw them even when they shouldn't be there. He said it's easy to get caught up in paranoia in our fast-paced world, a constantly changing place where more and more of our interaction is simulated. I have to give him one thing. It's a great explanation. It neatly explains everything. It perfectly explains everything, in fact. I have every reason to shake off this nightmarish fear that something or consciousness or being out there wants me to open the door so it can capture me for some horrible fate worse than death. It would be foolish, after hearing that explanation, to stay in here until I starve to death just to spite the entity that might have got everyone else. It would be foolish to think that, after hearing that explanation, I might be one of the last people left alive on an empty world, hiding in my secure basement room, spiting some unthinkable deceptive entity just by refusing to be captured. It's a perfect explanation for every single strange thing I've seen or heard, and I have every reason in the world to let all of my fears go and open the door. That's exactly why I'm not going to. How can I be sure? How can I know what's real and what's deception? All of these damn things with their wires and their signals that originate from some unseen origin. They're not real. I can't be sure. Signals through a camera, faked video, deceptive phone calls, emails, even the television, lying broken on the floor. How can I possibly know it's real? It's just signals, waves, light, the door. It's bashing on the door. It's trying to get in. What insane mechanical contrivance could it be using to simulate the sound of man attacking the heavywoods so well? At least I'll finally see it with my own eyes. There's nothing left in here for it to deceive me with. I've ripped apart everything else. It can't deceive my eyes, can it? Seen with your own eyes, don't trust them. They wait. Was that desperate message telling me to trust my eyes? Or warning me about my eyes too? Oh my God, what's the difference between a camera and my eyes? They both turn light into electrical signals. They're the same. I can't be deceived. I have to be sure. I have to be sure. Date unknown. I calmly asked for paper and a pen, day in and day out, until it finally gave them to me. Not that it matters. What am I going to do? Poke my eyes out? The bandages feel like part of me now. The pain is gone. I figure this will be one of my last chances to write legibly, as, without my sight to correct mistakes, my hands will slowly forget the motions involved. This is a sort of self-indulgence. This writing, it's a relic of another time, because I'm certain everyone left in the world is dead, or something far worse. I sit against the padded wall day in and day out. The entity brings me food and water. It masks itself as a kind nurse, as an unsympathetic doctor. I think it knows that my hearing has sharpened considerably now that I live in darkness. It fakes conversations in the hallways, on the off chance that I might overhear. One of the nurses talks about having a baby soon. One of the doctors lost his wife in a car accident. None of it matters. None of it is real. None of it gets to me, not like she does. That's the worst part, the part one almost can't handle. The thing comes to me masquerading as Amy. Its recreation is perfect. It sounds exactly like Amy, feels exactly like her. It even produces a reasonable facsimile of tears that it makes me feel on its lifelike cheeks. When it first dragged me here, it told me all the things I wanted to hear. It told me that she loved me, that she had always loved me, that it didn't understand why I did this, that we could still have a life together, if only I would stop insisting that I was being deceived. It wanted me to believe. No, it needed me to believe that she was real. I almost fell for it. I really did. I doubted myself for the longest time. In the end, though, it was all too perfect, too flawless, and too real. The false Amy used to come every day, and then every week, and finally stop coming altogether. But I don't think the entity will give up. I think the waiting game is just another one of its gambits. I will resist it for the rest of my life, if I have to. I don't know what happened to the rest of the world, but I do know that this thing needs me to fall for its deceptions. If it needs that, then maybe, just maybe, I'm a thorn in its agenda. Maybe Amy is still alive out there somewhere, kept alive only by my will to resist the deceiver. I hold on to that hope, rocking back and forth in my cell to pass the time. I will never give in. I will never break. I am a hero. The doctor read the paper the patient had scribbled on. It was barely readable, written in the shaky script of one who could not see. He wanted to smile at the man's steadfast resolve, a reminder of the human will to survive, but he knew that the patient was completely delusional. After all, a sane man would have fallen for the deception long ago. The doctor wanted to smile. He wanted to whisper words of encouragement to the delusional man. He wanted to scream, but the nerve filaments wrapped around his head and into his eyes made him do otherwise. His body walked into the cell like a puppet and told the patient, once more, that he was wrong and that there was nobody trying to deceive him. The mind is a complex thing that no one can truly hope to fully understand. You can study it all day long, but there are things inside that defy all human logic. In a way, we are all prisoners to our own thoughts, and some are hard to escape. I used to love riding my bike. I got my first one when I was 10 and still have it at age 17. I rode it most days, basically any chance that I got. There was nothing like pedaling around in the nice weather with a cool breeze blowing in my face. We lived in a large neighborhood, and I always made a big loop completely around it. It would take hours to complete the whole trip, but I prefer to be outdoors rather than inside watching TV. That's why it was the worst day of my life when my accident happened. It was the summer after I graduated from high school. I had decided to go to the University of Montana, which was over 2,000 miles from my home in Virginia. My parents didn't love me moving so far away, but I was really excited. I always wanted to go out west, to see the mountains and scenery that we didn't have here. I really wanted to soak in as much as I could in the final months I had left, though. I love my home state, and I rode my bike even more than normal over the summer. The day my accident happened, I was riding around the neighborhood as usual. I didn't have a thought in my head besides how nice the weather was. I was distracted from the road by the many birds that flew over. It never mattered. The few cars that ever drove by were easily visible, so I could space out as much as I wanted. I rode all around the far corners of the block and headed towards the entrance. The opening of the neighborhood was next to a pretty good-sized road, and I normally went to where it began and then turned around. I think that day I was living in my own world a little too much. I approached the entrance of the neighborhood and saw a deer off to the right. It was just standing still in the field next to where the houses began. I became completely distracted from what I was doing, and even after I heard the sound of a large truck, I still didn't take my eyes off the deer. A few moments later I felt it. I hadn't noticed how far I drifted across the street, and I was in the center of the road when the truck hit me. It wasn't going very fast, faster than the 20 mph that was allowed in my neighborhood, but not anything ridiculous. It didn't feel like that. My bones shook as the truck collided with me. I bounced off the hood and hit hard off the top of the truck onto the right side of the road. I had a sickening pain in my left leg as I soared in the air, but the real problem came when I collided head first with the road. I felt intense pain all around my skull before everything went black. I remember waking up for a moment, lying there flat on my back wondering where I was. The man in the truck who hit me was kneeling by my side and shouting into his cell phone. I tried to focus, but I couldn't. I tried to lift my head up, but as I did, I felt a cold surge of liquid on the back of my head and a sharp headache above my eyes. I laid back flat as the substance spread to the side of my head and suddenly felt hot. I realized as I passed out again that it was my blood, and it was absolutely gushing out. I remember having a very strange dream. I was in total darkness. It was hard to tell I was even dreaming, but I was able to walk around, and I could put my hands on what felt like cold walls made out of stone. Even weirder, I could hear voices off in the distance that seemed to be having an argument of some kind. I just walked around in the dark for what felt like 10 minutes before the dream began to fade. When I woke up again, I was in the hospital. It had apparently been 7 hours, and as my surroundings came into focus, I remembered what had happened. I examined my body for injuries and saw clearly that my left leg was wrapped up and elevated. I assumed it was broken, at least nothing else appeared to be damaged. But as I reached towards my head, I felt bandages and a huge sting of pain. I winced and laid back down flat in the bed. Even though I had only sat up for a moment, my head was absolutely pounding. A nurse rushed over and told me not to move. I laid my head down all the way and closed my eyes. Even having them open was very painful, and my brain throbbed worse than I ever could have imagined. I lay flat like that for hours, but I couldn't fall asleep. I wondered if I was going to be all right and how badly I was hurt. My family came in to visit, but I don't really even remember much from it other than my sister grabbing my hand and my mom in tears lightly rubbing my head. It was strange to see my sister so upset, as she was 6 years younger than me, so we weren't very close. They left the room after what I assumed was a couple hours, but I have no idea how long it actually was. Once it got dark outside after what felt like days, I was finally able to drift into an uncomfortable sleep. That night, I had the most unique dream of my entire life. It felt like I was waking up. I only ever had that feeling when I was coming to from a night's rest. It just didn't feel like any dream I ever had. It wasn't blurry or distant, and my legs didn't feel like jelly. It literally felt like I was awake, but my leg and head didn't hurt. The previous dream gave me a similar feeling, but it was so dark I couldn't really tell what was going on. It was dim again all around me, and I still didn't know what to make of my surroundings. But there was light coming through this time, and I could see a few feet in front of me. When I turned to my right, I saw blue light breaking through the darkness, revealing that I was in a cave or tunnel of some kind. I followed the blue and stepped out of what I realized was in fact a cave. It was small and sat in the middle of a forest. There was a large flat rock lying to the side, as if it was a door of some kind that had been removed. I presumed that the last dream I had was in this same cave, but the door had been closed. As I walked out, I did a 360 and looked up at the treetops. It was unlike any forest I had ever been in, greener than any normal woods, and the ground was clean and tidy. No branches, leaves, or pine needles, which made it clear to me that I was dreaming. I don't know how to explain the feeling it gave me, but it was just so obvious the forest wasn't real by the color and cleanness. I looked down and noticed I was on a path that appeared to lead out of the trees. I followed it for about 100 feet until it opened up into a big clearing. The first thing that really caught my eye was the grass. It was bright green, just like the leaves on the trees. Like the trees, it too was a strange shade, like it was made out of plastic or something. It was so colorful that it felt like I was in a cartoon. It sounds funny, but the first thing I thought of was where the Teletubbies lived. The clearing had a big dip in the middle like a bowl, and there were flowers that surrounded it. Across from the clearing on a bit of an incline, I saw a house. I decided to walk across and check it out, as something about it just felt right, like I had previously lived there. I stepped out off of the path onto the grass and looked up at the sky. It gave me the same feeling as the grass and leaves, bright and blue with a few clouds that appeared to be the exact same size and shape. The sun looked like someone had drawn it with crayons and had those cartoonish rays coming off of it. As I left the tree line behind, I expected to feel the sun's heat, but I didn't. The air felt nice, but the sun didn't seem to have much power at all. The grass was soft under my feet, and I noticed for the first time I was barefoot. I jumped around a bit, soaking in how soft it felt against my skin. It was so green that I almost expected to see paint on the bottom of my feet. After running around some, I turned my attention back to the house. I could make out more details now. It was white with a nice front porch and flowers planted in what looked like a garden a little to the side. It was weird because it wasn't like I had just sat down and laid out my dream home before. But when I saw it, I just knew it was perfect. Like it was in a place in my mind that I never accessed, but it possessed what would be the perfect home specifically for me. I walked down to the bottom of the valley and was surrounded by yellow and red flowers. I began up the hill and approached the front porch, and everything about it just felt so ideal. The windows even were perfect, and I saw 2 comfortable-looking chairs sitting on the large front porch. There was a garden on the right side of the porch, just like I had thought, with some blue and white flowers. I don't know flowers well, so I wasn't even sure what kind they were. But like everything else, they just felt right. "Hey man, where you been?" I almost jumped out of my skin as I heard a voice to my left. "Whoa, sorry, didn't mean to scare you, buddy." I caught my breath and turned to see who had spoken. It was strange. The voice felt so familiar. When I turned my gaze to the left, I wasn't sure how to react for a moment. I think anyone would have had a similar reaction because unless you're a twin or looking in a mirror, you could never lay your eyes on such a sight. It was me, except it wasn't. He looked like me, but if I was much skinnier and had sunken dark eyes. His hair was lighter than my shade of dark brown, and he had a bit of 5 o'clock shadow going. I didn't even know what to say. Despite his appearance, he did at least look friendly. Hi." I could barely muster a response. "Dude, it's me, your cousin, remember?" As soon as he said it, I felt dumb. I couldn't quite put my finger on which cousin he was, but I had a lot, and there were many I hadn't seen for years. He did feel familiar, and obviously looked like me, so cousin made a lot of sense. "Oh, hey, how have you been?" He chuckled to himself some. "I'm good, man. I should really be asking you that. After all, you're the one who's dreaming of me." It had completely slipped my mind that I was asleep and dreaming, but as soon as he said it, everything came back. I was in the hospital, I had hurt my head, and I was asleep right now. As it occurred to me, the dream began to slip away. I felt myself going in and out of consciousness. Before I fully woke up, he said one last thing to me. "See you soon, pal." I blinked my eyes and was back in the hospital with my family surrounding me. I forgot about the dream almost immediately, and the next couple of nights, I didn't have any. After another 5 days passed, my family was able to take me home to my relief. They turned my bedroom into my own personal hospital room and brought the TV from the den in so I could watch television in bed. It was going to be a while until my leg healed, months at least. My head still hurt a lot, and I had some sharp headaches, but it seemed to be improving a bit. The only thing that was odd was I had what I would call weird thoughts. I don't know a better way to put it honestly. I just thought about things, people, and places that I didn't really care about normally. It was weird, but those thoughts didn't exactly worry me. The ones that did were when my mom brought lunch later than normal, or my sister was talking on the phone too loud in her bedroom. I restrained myself from saying anything, but to my surprise, thoughts of harming them crossed my mind. I knew it had to be due to my injury, but it still scared me. I love my family so much, and they hadn't done anything wrong. But I couldn't help the thoughts. It was like they weren't even mine. I worried about it a lot as everything else seemed to be improving. I was able to calm myself down some at least. Even though I had those thoughts, I could stop myself from saying anything or acting on them. I knew too my head injury was pretty serious. I tried to keep that in mind since it was clearly the reason for the horrible thoughts. My days were long and boring, and I began to get very restless. A little under a week in the hospital, and now a week at home, had me wishing for the escape of my bike. Night set in, and I was grateful to have gotten past the melancholy of late afternoon. I tried to sit up and wiggle my toes, which I could just barely. My head began to pound again, so I laid back flat on the mattress. I let out a deep sigh and glanced over at the calendar. It was a Thursday. That didn't mean anything to me, as normally on a Thursday night, I'd be out with my friends. A couple had come to visit me, but I didn't really enjoy it. I was the type who didn't want anyone's pity, and besides, it just wasn't fun in general. Sleep came pretty early, and to my surprise, I was back in that strange dream from my first night in the hospital. I stepped outside the cave and walked out of the woods feeling a sense of calm being back in this world. I didn't realize until that moment just how much I had missed this unique place. It was all the same as it had been the first time, and I headed towards the house looking around for my cousin. I looked up again at the copy and paste clouds and down at the fake-looking grass. I felt the strength in my leg and didn't feel the sharp, constant pounding in my head. I looked up at the house, and I noticed someone tending the garden. He seemed to realize I was there as he stood up and turned around slowly with a big smile. It was my cousin again, which I had guessed, and I regretted not finding out his name from my mom when I was awake. I knew I had met him before, but I couldn't place where it had actually been. "Hey man, where you been?" He yelled across the valley. I decided I was going to be less weird this time, and I remembered it was my dream. I clearly wanted him there for some reason, so I must have liked him a lot when we were kids or something. "Hey, sorry, glad to be back." He kept smiling as he wiped his hands off and walked over to me. "I understand. I'm sure you've been riding that bike a lot, right? Summer's definitely the best time for it." I wondered if he was my cousin how he knew that, but then I felt stupid as it wasn't like he was my actual cousin. This was my subconscious, and my cousin was me. Since I had hurt myself, I clearly was seeking some calm and someone familiar. I guess that's who this cousin was to me. I tried to remember a specific memory of us together from when we were kids, but I drew a blank. I approached the house, and he walked down to greet me. We reached each other about halfway up the incline. "Nah man, actually I can't bike right now. I hurt my leg pretty bad." He didn't look surprised. "Oh, that sucks, dude. Maybe that's why you're here. You need something to take your mind off of it." That was it. What he said made total sense. "For sure, well, what is there to do here?" He smiled. "Oh, so much. I got to warn you though, it's all like kid stuff, no TV or anything." Before I could say I was cool with it, he took the words right out of my mouth. "You won't need it. You kind of feel like a kid again here, if that makes sense, like playing tag or looking at flowers is all I need to be happy." I totally agreed. I didn't even want to watch TV or play video games. I wanted nothing more than to work on the garden or explore the forest. I'd be down to work on the garden. My eyes rose up to the front door of the house. It was black, which really stood out against everything else here. Something about it just fell off too, but I couldn't put my finger on what exactly. We tended the lush flowers for what felt like hours, planting new ones and watering old ones. I enjoyed it more than anything since I had gotten injured. I was so disappointed when I heard my mom's voice breaking through the dream. I felt myself go in and out of consciousness. I looked over at my cousin one last time, and he wasn't smiling. He looked sad, but he still uttered the same thing as last time. "See you soon." I woke up to Mom shaking me with a concerned look on her face. "Are you alright? It's almost 11? I usually woke up at 8, so that threw me off a bit." I understood why she was worried, as with my head injury, I'm sure a potential coma was always on a mother's mind. The doctor said there was no risk of that anymore, but I understood not exactly counting on that. "Yeah, Mom, I'm good. I was just tired." I began to feel annoyed at her for some reason. It's not like I have anything to do anyway. She took the hint and nodded before walking away, shaking a bit nervously. I'm sure she thought I may never wake up, so it was going to take a minute for her to calm down. When she was almost through the bedroom door, I remembered the dream and called out, "Hey Mom, do I have a cousin about my age? Looks a lot like me, but skinnier?" She stopped and turned around a bit confused. Well, there's your cousin Daniel, who's 3 years younger, and your cousins Tommy and Rob. I think they're pretty much your age. Why do you ask?" Was just wondering, no reason. I definitely sounded annoyed, so she just half nodded again and then walked away. I didn't know which of the three he was, but it had to be one of them. I had some slight memories of each one, but weirdly none of them actually felt like him. Maybe that was just because it was a dream, and everything in a dream is a bit off. More importantly, I just hoped to return to the dream that night. That day was particularly boring as I just watched TV without any enjoyment. I counted the minutes until it hit an acceptable time to go to bed. Time dragged so much, and every member of my family annoyed me to no end. It was unfair, they were just trying to help, but I still hated every minute they were in my room, and they seemed to catch on pretty fast. By dinner time, Mom just dropped off the food with a half smile and didn't even say a word. Once 8 hit and bedtime approached, I finally felt bad about how rude I was being to my family. I didn't get why, but I couldn't stand the sight of them. It was like I suddenly hated them for some inexplicable reason. It was scary too, as part of why I sent them away quickly was because I wanted to harm them if they stayed any longer. I closed my eyes and tried to rationalize my feelings. It was so easy to just blame everything on my injury, plus my inability to do anything on my own. That had to be why. There was nothing else it could be. I kept myself up until 9, and then I shut the TV off. I had a hard time falling asleep, as due to lack of exercise I never felt that tired. I eventually drifted off, and to my delight I woke up in the cave again. I took my time walking out of the forest, really soaking in my surroundings and marveling at the beauty of the trees. I stepped out into the crisp grass and felt the slightly warm embrace of the bright blue sky. I wondered if it was ever cloudy here, but I assumed probably not. I saw my cousin in the garden again, and his face lit up when he noticed me. He jogged down into the middle of the valley and embraced me to my surprise. It caught me off guard, but I didn't mind at all and I hugged him back. "Welcome back, dude, I missed you." "Missed you too, bro. So, what are we getting up to today?" "Well, since you like the garden, how about we go check out the pond?" He pointed to the left near the edge of the forest, and I saw the idyllic body of water. I hadn't noticed it before, but it looked absolutely beautiful. "Yeah, sounds good." We walked over slowly, and I debated whether I should try one of the 3 cousins' names, but I decided to be safe and wait and see if he mentioned it. I didn't want to be rude, and I felt like I should know who he was, since we were clearly so close at one point. We reached the pond, and like the sky and the grass, the blue of the water looked almost fake. Like picturesque from a painting, a color that nothing in real life could achieve. We looked at it for a few minutes, and then walked around its borders admiring the calm water. I felt so at ease staring at it. I didn't want to be anywhere else. After what felt like 20 minutes of walking around the pond and soaking in its majesty, we decided to head up to the house so I could finally check it out. To my absolute horror and annoyance, I felt my body beginning to wake up again. I tried to force myself to stay asleep, but I could tell I had no power over it. I looked at my cousin, as he also realized that I was waking up. Once again, he simply said, "See you soon." I woke up ready to scold whoever had caused me to leave my paradise, but to my surprise, I must have just gotten up on my own account. There was no one there, and it was around 9 in the morning. I stretched some and thought about my dream. I couldn't explain it, but it really did feel like my ideal calm, happy place. I just felt so at peace there, relaxed and at ease. Nothing in the real world could replace how I felt in my dream world. Mom came in to check on me about 5 minutes later and put my breakfast on the table next to me. I debated shoving her into the wall as she did. I had to fight against my own body, but I resisted the foreign strong urge to do so. She left the room without saying much, and I sat back trying to remember how much I love my family. For the next 6 hours, no one came into the room except for Mom again, who just dropped off lunch and only asked if I was all right. My dad came in later and tried to talk, but I mostly ignored him. I just wanted to be asleep. It seemed like my head was doing better, but my thoughts contradicted that feeling. I felt like I hated my family. I didn't, of course, but my brain suggested to me that I did. It made me want to sleep even more, as rest helps everything, and I wanted my head to heal quicker. I really couldn't take the grim thoughts anymore. Once the clock hit 8, I calmed down some, as knowing sleep was coming soon really put me at ease. Mom had dropped off dinner around 7, but didn't say much. I figured my family was talking about how difficult I was being. I hated the thought of them talking about me in detail without being able to defend myself, but I didn't really blame them. I knew I had to be so frustrating, and I'm sure they wondered what they had done that I was so mad about. I decided to call it a day even earlier, a little before 9. I shut the lights off and laid down on my pillow. I wanted rest, to sleep, to be in that magical place and allow my brain to heal. Thankfully, not only did I fall asleep pretty quick, but I returned to my perfect dream. I found myself in the cave, and with a smile walked down the path, approaching the gorgeous green and blue that lay ahead. I noticed for the first time there weren't any animals in the woods, and there hadn't been any ducks or fish in the pond. It seemed weird, but maybe to me, my perfect oasis didn't have animals. I certainly didn't love any, so that didn't sound too far-fetched. I always felt like I should, but even dogs and cats didn't do much for me. And maybe on some level, the deer, being the cause of my accident, made me subconsciously have an issue with all animals. I reached the tree line, and with a happy sigh stepped out onto that now familiar grass. I took in a deep breath and let the pleasant air fill my lungs. I closed my eyes and just stood there like that, breathing in and out slowly, trying to savor every moment I had in this oasis. I hated that I had no control over when I woke up, and I had no idea how much time was actually passing. But maybe that's what made it so perfect, that it was fleeting, and no matter what I did, it wasn't going to last forever. "Hey, you're back." I was starting to worry. I smiled before I even opened my eyes as I welcomed my cousin's voice. He was standing by the garden again, and he waved me over. I began to head across the lush field, wondering what we were going to do that night. The garden or pond sounded solid, but doing something new seemed even better. I just wanted to explore this place. After all, on some level, I created all of it. I wanted to see every little thing, every blade of grass, and every colorful flower. I reached the front porch after a nice slow walk, admiring the clouds. "Hey bud, how's it going?" He greeted me. "Good dude, how about you?" I felt so comfortable with him, and I decided I was going to figure out who he was in real life. Clearly, he meant a lot to me, and I felt guilty that I couldn't even find out which cousin he was. "So, pal, what do you want to do today?" He put his hand on my shoulder as he spoke. His hands were so bony, I was almost concerned by how skinny he was. I'm not sure, whatever you think." "Well," he turned towards the front door, "we could check out the house if you wanted." I had almost forgotten about the house. It was so easy to get caught up in everything else. Once he said it, I wanted nothing more than to see what the inside looked like. What I in my mind thought the perfect house should be. "Yeah, that sounds great." He smiled and ushered me up the front steps. I moved out in front of him and examined the black front door. It was larger than a normal door, and the black color really stood out against the bright surroundings. As I approached it, I realized there was no handle. "Oh yeah, that door is just for show. It's actually a really crazy entrance." He stepped in front of me and pulled on the left side of the door. To my amazement, it slid off the frame, and he leaned it up against the wall. When I turned back to where the door had been, I saw myself staring back. It took me a moment to figure out that I was looking at a mirror, a door-shaped mirror that sat perfectly where the old door had been. There still wasn't a handle on it, so I wasn't any less confused. "Yeah, it's pretty nuts." He stepped over to the mirror and stuck his hand towards it. To my shock, his arm disappeared through the glass as if it wasn't even there. "You actually have to step right through the mirror. It's pretty weird, but kind of cool." I had to agree with that. It felt like a portal or something. So just like step right through it. I was still a bit scared I was going to hit my head off the glass. "Yeah, it holds its shape, but you can pass right through it. Just step into it like you would a wide open door." I nodded and turned back to the glass. It was a really weird feeling to look at myself in a door frame, and I felt a weird sense of dread. I trusted what my cousin had said, so I brushed it aside. I took one last deep breath before I put my leg through the glass, and then the rest of my body followed. It felt like pushing through a foot of water, and before I knew it, I was on the inside of the house. It really did feel just like water, but I wasn't wet at all. I hadn't even finished marveling about how strange of a sensation it was before I noticed the interior of the house. It was perfect as I suspected, everything laid out the exact way I never knew I always wanted it to be. The living room was to my right, facing away from the door, the stairs to the second floor were directly ahead, and the kitchen was to the left. Everything I saw was just like how I would have wanted it. I never once in my life thought about how I would furnish my perfect house, but I knew immediately that this was it. I smiled to myself and turned back to the door, waiting for my cousin to join me. I was a bit startled when I saw this side of the mirror door. It didn't reflect the inside of the house. It was just pitch black glass, a perfect rectangle of darkness, and I wondered why my cousin hadn't come through it yet. To make things even stranger, as I stepped back next to the door, I heard what sounded like him softly crying. Hey dude, are you coming?" I was really confused, so I tried to put my arm through the door, but it just bounced off and I actually hurt my hand a bit. I began to feel that sense of dread again, like before I had entered the house. I've waited so long for this. I finally heard my cousin's voice from behind the door. "What do you mean, man?" It was quiet for a moment as I began to register that he was crying tears of joy, not sadness. "You really messed up." I heard him laughing now, and I started to become truly scared. I thought I was never going to get out. "You never let me out like the others." I was so confused, but I just waited as he continued to speak. "Locked away and forgotten forever. Even anger gets his time in the meadow, but not me." He paused for a moment, and I didn't have any idea what to say. "Well, It's your turn to be locked away. I'm going to live in our body now, and you can watch me from behind that damn door." I was still confused, but on some level, I was starting to pick up on what was happening. Like a sense I felt in my whole body. I had made a huge mistake coming inside this house. I know you're not going to understand this, but if nothing else, I will at least explain it to you. One, because I am a part of you, and I do feel as though I owe you some explanation. He paused again, and I heard a faint snicker. And two, because the torture will be worse if you truly grasp what's happening here. I was so lost and terrified I just waited for him to give me some clarity. I couldn't even respond. "I'm a part of you. I always have been. I've been in your mind since the day you were born." He paused again, almost to make sure I was listening. "You obviously have emotions. Love, anger, sadness, fear, and happiness are the main five. But there's me too. I'm one of those emotions, but unlike the others, you never let me out. This place isn't a dream. It's a state of your mind that you're never meant to enter. It's deeper than a dream, where your emotions live. We all have houses here like this one. Sadness is about 15 miles to the east, and anger is another 10 from him. This world we call the meadow contains our whole existence. In theory, all of us are supposed to get our turn spending time in this world your subconscious created. When you're happy, happiness can step through his door and spend time in the forest or by the flowers, or anywhere he chooses until another emotion takes his place. There's supposed to be a symbiotic relationship between us. We decided that when you were only a few years old. Everyone gets their time in the meadow, so no one misses out, and you can continue being a mentally sound human being. If we all fought to get out, you would lose your mind. The only lie they told me before this world was crafted, and we were still in the abyss together, was that I was the only emotion who was never going to get a turn in the sun. They lied, condemned me to this house forever, because they thought if I ever got out that you would become a monster. And you almost seem to be aware of that too. There were only 3 times your whole life I was almost allowed out. The first was when your boss told you that you were going to be working weekends for the next 2 months. You were so mad, I'm sure anger spent the whole day out in the meadow. For a fleeting moment I felt it. You had thoughts about killing your boss, and I was able to get my arm through the door before you calmed yourself down. It was an amazing moment because I realized that maybe I would be free one day. The other 2 moments were when your girlfriend cheated on you, and when your teacher didn't let you correct the test you failed, the one that ruined your grade for the whole year. Both times I got arms through again, but unfortunately, you didn't have those thoughts for long enough. My hope began to fade as those were the only moments ever that I almost got out. Then the miracle happened, the best day of my whole life. I just listened in awe as he continued. I was sitting on the couch, half watching the world through your eyes and half just contemplating my existence. But then it was like a hurricane suddenly appeared, and I saw you had been hit by a truck. As you connected with the ground, the glass of the door shattered, and I saw the sunshine of the meadow for the first time ever. I almost couldn't believe it. I finally escaped my prison and got to embrace the meadow. Unfortunately, all the other emotions experienced the same thing, and we met up with each other. They decided for the betterment of all of us we were going back to our houses, and we'd repair the glass from the inside. They said you were in the cave since we were all outside, so we had to hurry. The broken glass fit together like big puzzle pieces, so it was easy to repair the doors. However, once it's repaired, there isn't anything we can do to break it. I agreed with the others, but I was never going back. We can't physically hurt one another or force each other to do anything, so I knew they were powerless to make me. When they all fixed their glass from the inside, I stayed on this porch and did so from the outside. They all became stuck again, and I was the only one who remained free. Being outside when I wasn't supposed to prevented any of them from coming out, even if you wanted to have that emotion. That's why you've been having those thoughts about your family. It's only me in your mind. As long as I'm outside, no one else can be. I knew too the significance of my situation. Since I'm in the meadow, but your honest feelings aren't what caused it, your brain can sense something is wrong, so instead of dreaming you come here. Your mind has a safeguard that you can't leave the cave, but I moved the rock that blocked the entrance. Your body as well has a defense mechanism when you approach the door to one of the houses. But it seems like I was pretty good at convincing you to trust me, and now you're going to be stuck in here forever. When you wake up, I'm going to be the one to wake up in your body. You can watch from behind that door the way I have your entire life. You'll essentially be an emotion now, and I'll make sure you never leave. It's only fair after all. That's what you did to me. I'm going to finally live, and you're going to have to just sit here and watch." He finally stopped, and I tried to absorb what he had said. I was so confused, but also terror had overcome me. Everything he said was insane. He had to be lying. I had a feeling in my stomach that he wasn't, though. I guess it's because this is all going on in my own mind. Except, is it my mind now? Or is it his? If I'm trapped in this place and he takes my body, it's not really me anymore. I couldn't imagine being stuck in here forever when he does God knows what with my body. I knew I had to try and reason with him. "I'll make sure you get your turn outside. Please don't leave me. I'm so sorry you were trapped in here." I waited a moment before my heart sank as I heard him laugh. "It's too late for any of that. I hate you. I want to truly live, and besides, if you did let me out, it would mean you were about to do something horrible. I know you'd never actually do that because you're not that kind of person." He stopped and waited for a few seconds. I'm going to make you never want to return to your body. I'm going to start with your family. You'll be so ashamed of what I do, you're going to beg me to stay in this house." I froze when he mentioned my family. I was scared for a moment, but the fear quickly bubbled over into a pure rage. How could he do this? This was my mind. I'm the one who's in control here. "Let me out. This is my brain. You're just a part of me. You can't do this." I screamed, banging on the black glass. He chuckled again. "You're right. I couldn't have done this. You did it yourself, and now you're screwed." I heard his footsteps fading away as I screamed at him over and over until I sank onto the wood floor with my head in my hands. I just sat there in tears, trying to figure out what to do. I didn't know if my cousin was still around out there, but it didn't matter either way. I decided to try and find another way out of the house, but just as I expected, all the windows had closed blinds that wouldn't open, no matter how hard I pulled on them. There was no basement, but there was a second floor with a bedroom and bathroom with windows that were the same as the first floor. I tried to break the glass, but it didn't budge. It was clear that there was truly no way out, and I went back downstairs to cry some more. After what felt like an hour, I saw the black of the door begin to flicker, and for a moment I began to feel some hope again. That all faded when it became clear what I was seeing. The door stopped flickering, and I was given a full view of my bedroom. To my absolute terror, I realized what was happening. He had woken up in my body. I sat in front of it, eyes wide with fear, watching him turn what should be my head from side to side and stretching my arms. It felt like a first-person TV screen. The door was showing me the view from behind his eyes. It reminded me of the view you see in a Call of Duty game. I was so scared as to what he was going to do with my body and to my family. I saw my mom enter the room with breakfast, and I screamed over and over, trying and get her attention. Thankfully, over the many painful hours of that first day, he didn't do much. He just sat there and flipped through the TV channels about 100 times. It seemed that he was being pleasant with my family, at least. That all changed when they went to bed. I saw through his eyes my clock that said 11, and after I realized he was just staring at the bedroom door. After another couple of minutes, he struggled up to his feet, and I couldn't even imagine how much damage he was doing to my still very broken leg. He limped out of the room and down the hallway, and my heart almost stopped when he entered my little sister's room. I began to yell again, trying anyway to get her attention, to warn her that I wasn't really me. He stood there at the foot of her bed for what felt like hours, just staring at her. After that painful stretch of time, he went into my parents' room and did the exact same thing. He finally returned to my room and laid down as the clock read 4:15. Before he fell asleep, he said something out loud that I knew was for me to hear. "It's going to be fun to watch them for a while. I'll wait to kill them until you've lost all hope." With that, my view flickered again, and the door returned to its previous totally black state. I didn't know what to do. I just collapsed to the floor and started to tear up again. I couldn't have ever imagined feeling this powerless. Nothing matched how futile and alone I felt. I couldn't do anything to stop or interact with him. All I could do was watch. For the next 4 days, it was basically the same routine. It was 4 days for him, but for me it felt like a month. I watched the world from behind what should be my eyes. He did what I had been doing, basically just lying in bed during the day. At night was when it all changed. He walked the halls and stared at my family. On the 4th night, he retrieved a large knife from the kitchen and hid it under my mattress. I knew he was close to hurting them. He seemed almost giddy to do so. I didn't know when he was going to do it, but regardless, there was nothing I could do to stop him. I tried the door all day long, but it was like pushing against a granite rock. I tried the windows too, but nothing. I looked for literally any way out of that house, but there was nothing at all. It was like a pristine prison, no bars or locks, but no way out just the same. After he had stashed the knife on the fourth night, and the view of my room faded to blackness, I officially gave up any shred of hope I had left. I sat halfway up the stairs and began to wonder if I should try and kill myself. I didn't know if it would even work, but I couldn't bear the thought of essentially watching myself kill my family members. My depressed thoughts were broken by a pounding noise on the side of the house next to the door. To my absolute shock, was it him? It had to be, right? Who else could it be in this place? Hey, I know you're in there. It was weird. The voice sounded like my cousin and me, but slightly different. It was much more aggressive, and the tone was deeper. Who's there? I yelled back, approaching the door. Don't worry, I'm not him. I'm here to help. I felt slightly better, but still incredibly confused. All right, well, who are you? I waited impatiently for the response. I'm your anger. I live in a house just like this one. I came a long way to talk to you, and you need to hear me out. I just stood there for a minute trying to decide what to do. It was abundantly clear this world was where my emotions lived, and the only one I had met turned out to be a monster. I could only imagine the kind of things the living embodiment of the emotion anger could be capable of. Look, I know you must be scared, but I'm here to help you. We want him back in this house too. I began to calm down some, but I was still worried. All right, well, what do you want to tell me? My voice shook much more than I hoped it would. I assumed one way or another he wasn't going to come in here. If he did, I figured he'd be trapped too. He's evil. He's pure hatred, and I don't know why we ever try to help him. That all seemed very clear to me. He said he's going to kill my family. I responded. Yes, well, he's capable of that for sure. I don't know if he told you any of this, but I'm going to explain what's going on. He had told me a lot, but I didn't know how much of it was actually true, so I just listened. When we first became aware of our own presence, none of us were sure what to do. There were 6 of us in a totally dark world, all of us trapped inside our own invisible boxes facing each other, only allowed out when you felt something. The first 10 years of your life, Happiness spent more time outside his box than the rest of us combined. As you got older, you filled in this world the way you saw fit. You, of course, weren't aware of that, but your experiences and memories created this world, the perfect setting for your emotions to live. We call this place the Meadow, and as you aged, you experienced a wider range of emotions. So all of us got our fair time in the sun. You have other feelings too, like frustration or shame, for example, but they're all microcosms of each of us. We agreed that we wouldn't try and stop each other from staying out. The pact was that no one would remain outside longer than we were supposed to and risk damaging our whole living space. If anyone was outside when they weren't supposed to be, you would begin to lose your mind, and the others wouldn't be able to do anything about it. That's why your accident was the biggest disaster your mind could have experienced. Your injury caused all of our glass to break, and Hate was finally allowed to leave his house. We all had to meet up quickly. If one or more of us are outside when we aren't supposed to be, you come here instead of dreaming. Normally, even if that happens, you're still safe, trapped in the cave like you were when we were debating what to do. But if the door is moved, then you're susceptible to what ended up occurring. One of us could trap you in their house, and then be the one who woke up in your body. The resulting person would be insane, but in very different ways. If fear had gotten out, you would have turned into someone so paranoid you'd never leave your bedroom. If I got out, you would turn into someone who would beat up another driver for cutting you off. If sadness got out, you would never leave your bed, crying all day long. If hate got out, like he did, you become a cold and calculated murderer who only wants to make the world a darker place. I processed what he was saying as he continued. That's why I'm here. He can't be allowed to destroy everything. You need to get back in control of your body, so our symbiotic relationship can resume. I let everything he had said sink in. My cousin, or I guess Hate, told me most of what Anger said, but there was new information too. I was kind of surprised Hate had actually been telling the truth, but I guess he had no reason not to. I was stuck in here either way. One thing really seemed odd to me, and I had to ask him, how are you here? Aren't all emotions trapped in their house unless the person in control lets them out? Well, that's the thing. No matter what he might try, say, or act like, he's always angry. The one reality that he can't get away from is that if he's in control, I'll be in the Meadow almost 100% of the time. That actually did make sense, so I continued to listen to him. When your accident happened and we met up, We decided we had to go back inside for the betterment of everyone. We all agreed, even Haight. We were so naive to think he would really do it, but we didn't have much of a choice. On top of everything else, he's the only one of us whose expression isn't stuck in place, so he can be very convincing. We all had to trap ourselves back in our houses immediately, so it wasn't like someone could watch him to make sure he really did it. Even if one of us did, we can't use force to make him anyway. So, he escaped, and now he's in control of your body. You have to find a way to get him here. I had no idea how I could possibly do such a thing. How do I get him back here if I can't leave this house? It was quiet for a few seconds. I don't know, but I'm going to tell the others that once you get him here, we're all going to make sure he goes back inside. We can't physically touch him, but if we surround him, it will create an invisible barrier that he'll be stuck in. He won't be able to get away from you. I still just shook my head in frustration. But how? I don't know how to get him here. I have no idea what to do. It was quiet for even longer, and I assumed he was thinking. The way he got out in the first place is you hurt your head, which broke the glass. You need to find a way to break the glass, and then we'll have a chance to stop him. I racked my brain, trying to think of any way I could break the door. I can't damage it in any way. How do I break it? Look, I have to tell the others while I still can, so you need to figure it out. I felt so frustrated. I didn't have any idea what I could do. Just remember, this is your mind. We're all living here in your head. If he loses his balance, he might fall and knock himself out, maybe even into a coma. Try and find a way to unbalance him, that's all I can suggest. I absorbed what he said and thought about what I could do. I trust that you'll find a way. We're all counting on you. Hopefully I'll see you again out in the meadow. With that, I heard his footsteps fading away, and I sat down on the steps, thinking deeply about my options. Then he yelled one last thing. If you hurt your head again, you may not wake up. You'll be stuck here until the meadow decays. But you'll be able to save your family. I know that matters more to you. The footsteps continued, and then it became dead silent. I scrambled to think of anything I could possibly do to get out of the house. Like anger said, I needed to think of a way for him to lose his balance. But what could I do? I was in here and didn't seem to have any control over what happened to my body in the real world. I tried frantically to think of something and began to panic as I knew he had to wake up soon. To my horror, the door began to flicker, and it was clear that he was now awake. I freaked out as any minute he could hurt my family. He didn't do anything for most of the day. He went through the same routine as normal, and after dinner he was still just lying in bed. I was at a loss as to what I could do, but I felt a sense of urgency when night hit. The clock read 8:30, and he reached under the mattress to make sure the knife was still there. I banged on the door screaming, but I knew it was dumb and useless. At about 11, he pulled out the knife and placed it on my bedside table. As he did, he slid the clock over to make room for it. Even just that made me mad, as I had my clock in a very specific part of my table, and everyone in my family knew not to mess with it. To reaffirm all my fears, I heard him speak out loud. "Tonight's the night. I hope you're watching in there. This is my body now, and I'm never giving it up. Don't worry, after I do this, I'm going to travel the world. I know that's something you've always dreamed of. I'll give you that. You can watch me live my new life." I was frozen, any shred of hope draining from me. He was quiet for a moment before he said one last thing. "That's more than you've ever given me." He then turned away from the clock and shut the lights off. I tried to yell at him, but I stopped pretty quick. He couldn't hear me. Right before I totally gave up, I remembered something I had just seen. When he placed a knife on the table, he had to move the clock. It bothered me on a deep level because it's one of those small things that can set someone off. I turned to the living room and saw the couch and 2 armchairs that faced the fireplace. I couldn't leave here, but I could interact and move things that were inside. Everything was laid out the way my subconscious wanted it to be. So what would happen if I moved it? Would it throw off my brain and cause some kind of issue? I was, after all, still in my own mind, and maybe if I caused a dramatic change, it would affect him in the real world. Anger had used the word unbalance. If I moved things out of place, that seemed like it would count as at least a metaphorical loss of balance. Either way, it couldn't hurt. I had to try something, or my family was going to die, and I was never going to be in control of my own body again. I stood up with a new sense of hope and vigor. I didn't dare believe it would work, but I was angry, and it was a start at least. I hated this entity that was my own hate itself, and I couldn't let him destroy my life. I began to walk over to the living room and looked over my shoulder to see he was now standing. My left leg was the one that was broken, and when I faced the door, the living room was to the left of me. So that was the side of the house I was going to push everything towards. He reached back over to the table and picked up the knife. I knew I was running out of time, and I shoved the couch as hard as I could. It was heavy and hard to move, but I put everything I had into the push, and it finally budged. It slowly slid to the fireplace, and I slid both chairs over next. Just then I noticed for the slightest second, he seemed to stumble some. It could have just been due to my broken leg, but it was enough for me to hope. I went to the kitchen and carried the microwave into the living room and placed it onto the couch, along with all the cups, plates, and silverware. It was funny, there were eating utensils as there was no food, and I hadn't felt hungry once. Everything I could get my hands on I grabbed and placed on the far side of the house. I looked back at the door, and he seemed to be tilting over to the left, and I realized it was working. I frantically scanned the house for anything else to move. He was clearly off balance, but he wasn't down yet, and he limped out of my bedroom into the hallway. I remembered the bed upstairs, and I raced up the steps, almost falling in the process. I ran into the bedroom and pulled on the bed as hard as I could, barely able to move it. I had to turn it to the side to shove it through the doorway, and then I just pushed it down the steps. It bounced off the front door and laid flat at the bottom of the stairs. From downstairs through the door I heard him say, "Hey, what are you doing in there?" I ran down the steps and almost fell again. I saw on the screen the view of my sister sleeping and the knife raised. I put everything I had behind the mattress and in one motion shoved it all the way into the living room, slamming it off the couch. All the contents of the house were now on the same side. He was standing over my sister's bed with a knife about to bring it down on her. As soon as the bed hit the couch, though, he seemed to finally lose all balance. He looked like he tried to catch himself, but it was no use. He crashed hard head first onto the hardwood floor, and the glass shattered. I didn't even wait a minute before I dove through the front door onto the porch. The glass was broken into 6 big pieces, but I wasn't taking any chances. I surveyed the meadow, and it wasn't bright and sunny anymore. The sky was gray, and there was a light drizzle. I noticed the path to the cave and began walking towards it. I knew he would have to appear in there soon since I was outside of the house. I waited near the entrance of the forest for what felt like hours. I didn't know how long it would take for him to show up, but I knew he had to. "Looks like you figured it out." I heard a voice that sounded like mine, and for a moment I thought it was him. But it had come from behind me, and I turned to see who I immediately knew to be the other emotions. All of them had my face, but with minor differences. Anger was the one who spoke, and he basically looked just like me, but with squinted eyebrows. Sadness stood beside him with tears in his eyes. Happiness was on his other side with a big grin. Love had warm red cheeks and swayed back and forth slowly. Fear stood a few steps behind the rest, looking weary. "Where is he?" I was beginning to worry he wasn't going to show up. "Don't worry, it took you a while to show up after you got hurt. He'll be here. Your body is likely in the process of going into a coma state." He turned to Sadness. "Go and fix the door before he gets here." Sadness nodded and walked over towards the house. "We'll make sure he doesn't go anywhere, but only you can make him go back into the house. You're probably going to have to do it by force." I had no problem with that. "Oh, don't worry, I plan to. As soon as he appears in that cave, I'm going to drag him into the house." Anger looked like he wanted to smile, but I had a feeling that was impossible for him. Sadness returned after a few minutes, and the 6 of us stood there in a line, just waiting for Hate to finally appear. After another hour, there was a flicker of light in the cave, and finally there he was. That miserable, pathetic, hateful part of me just stood there in the darkness. I assumed he was looking right at us, but I think he hoped he would wake up and leave before we did anything. That wasn't going to happen. I rushed down the path, and he looked for somewhere to hide, but he wasn't going to get away from me. I approached the cave, and he raised his fists, but I wasn't going to be stopped. He swung at me, but I ducked his weak attempt and began to beat him into the ground. With every punch, I thought about my family and what he was going to do to them. I thought too about how I caused all this, and I hated him even more for being created by me. After hitting him more times than I could count, I grabbed him by the collar and dragged him down the path into the clearing. The whole time he begged and pleaded not to put him back in the house. I didn't even say a word in response. When I reached the other emotions, they created a circle around us, and all of us marched towards the front door. He clawed against the ground, He begged everyone not to put him in there, but just like me, none of them said a word. I reached the porch, and the others stopped in front of it. I pulled him up to his feet, right in front of the newly repaired door. "You're a monster, and you're going to be in here forever." He frantically tried to reason with me. "Please don't, I can't. I'm only like this because of you." I didn't feel any mercy. I just despised myself for creating this embodiment of my own hate. Without another word, I shoved him through the front door, and he passed back into his prison. I felt a huge sense of relief rush over me as I turned back to the other emotions. Anger nodded at me in an approving way, and the 5 of them began walking away, back to their respective houses, I assumed. I let out a large sigh as the sun began to come out again from behind the dark clouds. I started away from the front porch before I heard Hate's voice one more time. He wasn't begging or pleading anymore. He sounded full of rage. "Just remember, anytime you feel spiteful, or want someone to die, or hurt that broken head of yours, I'll be back. You can never truly get rid of me, because I'll always be a part of you. All it'll take is one mistake." He started laughing, and I debated answering him. There was no point in responding, though. It was like arguing with myself. I was weary. As he was right, I had to be more careful the rest of my life. I remembered, too, that I had just hit my head again after already sustaining a bad head injury, and like Anger said, I may never wake up. That was all right, as long as he couldn't hurt my family. I was in the meadow for a long time before I felt myself coming to, thankfully, once again in a hospital bed. I apparently had been unconscious for 3 weeks, and the doctors were worried I was never going to wake up. My family was so relieved I was awake that no one really even asked why I had been in my sister's room with a knife. When they finally did, I just claimed I couldn't remember what I was doing, but I apologized profusely. They all forgave me. They were just happy I was all right, and I was just happy that I hadn't hurt any of them. I'm still in the hospital, but hopefully I'm going to be able to go home soon. I haven't returned to the meadow since, but I assume happiness has had a lot of time outside since I have a newfound respect for the life I have. I do hope I never go back there. Even though it's beautiful, I know now that it is somewhere I don't belong. The mind is a complex thing. There's so much in there we don't understand. The only thing I can do is try and be as positive and kind as possible. There is a place for sadness and anger, and even fear, but hate is a foul emotion that should be kept locked away from the real world. I have grown to pity him some as I am, after all, the one who created him. But I still can't ever let him out. He is evil, and will have to watch me live my life without hope of ever leaving that house. I'm going to be careful about not hurting my head again. I'm likely going to have a lot of problems, but I'm not too worried about that. I'm just glad to be alive, and hopefully I'll be able to ride my bike again someday. I have to admit, despite my positivity, I feel different than I used to. It's like I can feel him in my bones. I try to ignore it, but I worry every minute that he's going to find a way out of that house, or that he already has and is hiding in my brain somewhere. I don't really know the rules of my own mind. I know what I was told, but I don't know if that all can change. I wonder if my paranoia is due to my injury, or because of him. I forget things. I sometimes question if any of this happened at all, or if it's all because of the injury. I wonder too, on the darkest of nights, if I'm even me. Maybe I'm still hate, and falling in my sister's room just made me forget that. Or what if the original me is still stuck in that house, and I'm still in control of his body? Or my body? His body? I can't figure out who I am, or who's in control anymore. It hurts my head to even think about it. I do believe that isn't true. I think I'm myself again. I mean, I have to be, right? But what if trapping me in the house made me become hate, and hate become me? So, I am myself, but now we've switched roles. The scary part is I don't think I could ever know for sure. The even scarier part is I still sometimes have thoughts about hurting my family. Who's to know for sure who, or what I really am? I think I lied about being positive because this is actually a living hell. Or maybe it's not. I just don't know anymore. Another week has passed, and the doctors are now telling me my condition is actually getting worse. They say I should be healing, but inexplicably I'm not for some reason. My family spends all day by my bedside, and I know they're really worried about me. I know too that I should appreciate that, but truthfully, I kind of wish they were all dead.